know that the pandemic has upended so many of your plans to create a strong resume towards medical school. So it just makes me so happy that you're using this time to focus on preparing for the upcoming medical school admissions process by being here with me and Lindsey. Just by being here, you're already thinking outside the box more than other applicants, and you're going to be ahead of the game in more ways than one. So tonight, we're going to be focused on creating a checklist of areas that you can focus on right now so you're not left scrambling on any last minute piece of the medical admissions puzzle. We're going to introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about Moon Prep, and then jump right into the content. So just stick with us. My name is Michaela, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the counselors at Moon Prep. I was previously an admissions counselor at a Big Ten university, so I've been right in the seat reading applications of students that were prepared for their college applications and also reading applications that were clearly thrown together and written the night before. Before that, I was a staff writer for a national magazine. And then, of course, I was the admissions counselor for the Big Ten University. So again, I have a unique perspective of having been the one reading the essays and applications on the other side of the screen. I love to bring this behind the curtain knowledge to all of you and share the college perspective with my students. This really helps them view their own essays and application from how the college will see their essays and applications. And also from my writing background, I love helping students find the story hidden in the activities in their resume.
Perfect. And my name is Lindsey, and I'm also a counselor here at Moon Prep. And for my experience, I previously have worked as a writer and SAT, ACT tutor for the past 5 years. And now I work one-on-one with pre-med students, both in high school and in college, preparing for the med school application process. And my real passion at Moon Prep is helping students create a compelling personal statement and ultimately, hopefully, emerge as a stronger writer. I do a lot of the writing here at Moon Prep, and I've interviewed admissions officers at colleges, medical schools, competitive summer camps, as well as other leaders in the university and medical school admission industry. So we're going to bring that perspective here for you today.
Perfect. And now Lindsey and I spend our time working as counselors at Moon Prep. So Moon Prep's team is made up of independent medical school counselors who work with students virtually and guide them through the entire admissions process. We're serving as a guide and a mentor to our students, and we're helping with both college and high school students selecting the right classes for their major, helping narrow down their career interests to choose a major or a specialty within medicine, whether also helping them find summer research opportunities or internships in high school and also in college, and also helping find shadowing experiences and hours. So we're helping our students build the strongest possible applicant profile. So when the medical school applications roll around, they're a competitive candidate for even the most selective university and med program. And of course, with our pre-med students, we're helping guide them through their applications so nothing's missed, helping brainstorm perfect college essays based on the hundreds of effective ones that we've seen over the years. And we're also essentially working with students on a one-on-one capacity. We're not following a typical Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 schedule. We're working nights, weekends, and in every time zone you can think of, honestly, whenever it's convenient for the student. And we really specialize, especially, Lindsey and I specialize in helping craft amazing essays that get your personality across effectively. Moon Prep is really unique because we only accept a limited number of students for each counselor, so we can completely focus on our students' individual needs. And of course, we work with medical school applicants and grad school applicants too, and we focus on medical school admissions and those direct medical programs or BSMD programs. So there's probably a mix of students, joining us here today. And the great thing about Moon Prep is that we all meet together to share advice about our students. So when you work with one counselor, one of us, you work with all of us.
Yeah, perfect. And so as Michaela kind of said, like, we are expecting a lot of different levels of students. So in the comments, if everyone could tell us, where you're from, what year you are in school too, and that can help us as well, knowing where to gear our content today. We do have like a wide variety of content for both, freshmen in college to maybe students going for BSMD program, all the way to students who are going to be applying to med school, this upcoming cycle. But just let us know where you're coming from, and we can definitely help you through that process. But before we kind of get into the content, I wanted to tell you guys about a special offer we have. So right now we're offering a $199 personal statement package. So this is perfect for the students who are planning on applying to med school in just a couple weeks or a couple months, really. And so we'll start, brainstorming with you. We'll help you go through a great topic, go through an editing round with you, making sure that your essay is ultimately as strong as possible. And then ultimately, it will really help showcase your personality, showcase your accomplishments. We're going to go over the personal statement a lot later on in the essay or in our webinar later. But, if you have any doubts about kind of tackling this huge part of the process on your own, just let us know and we can definitely help you with this process. But let's get to the good stuff. So this is kind of how to stay on track, an overall guideline, because of course you can decide, your second or third year that you want to be applying to medical school, but this is kind of more of a general outline if you do start from year one of your med school or of your undergraduate career. And so even if many of you are kind of in your third or fourth year, if you're younger, we do definitely advise that you spend these first couple of years wisely, maintaining a high GPA, forming strong relationships with like medical focused mentors who will ultimately write a letter of recommendation for you later on. But not just for that, but also just to have a mentor in the medical field. And it's also really important to build your extracurricular resume. And if you have any doubts about any of these things on the list, we're going to talk about them at length later on. Second year, that's typically when students start to prepare for the MCAT. Once again, we kind of advise students really are focusing on their GPA. For med school, a lot of not just your overall GPA, but your science GPA is going to be an important part of the process, as well as your MCAT score, as well as your extracurricular resume. So it is important that you're kind of juggling all of these balls all at once. So you should, start activities and continue with them as well. The ones that you like are really enjoying, making sure that you are starting to make an impact, gaining leadership positions if possible. And if you're in your third year now, so that means that the application process is really right around the corner for you. This is really the time to start to familiarize yourself with the application process. So if you haven't done it already, make an appointment with your pre-health advisor to ensure you're still on track, and as well as have all the necessary prerequisites that you need. Especially if you're a non-science major, it's really important that you're not, forgetting about a certain class that you can't fit into your schedule and have to delay your med school admissions. Now is also the time to start to research where you'd like to go to medical school. And so we advise that you look at specific admissions requirements, what specialty their students tend to match with in their teaching style, what their average GPA is, what their average MCAT score is. Are they accepting in-state or out-of-state students? Just starting to create a comprehensive list of med schools that you'd like to apply to, and then start to rank them in order of preference. Of course, a lot of med school is just applying widely, and ultimately whoever accepts you, you're lucky enough to get accepted, but it is nice to start to kind of build this list on your own. Most students tend to apply to about 17 schools. So if maybe your GPA is a little bit lower, your MCAT score is a little bit lower, your resume is not as robust as others, you might need to apply to more just to cast a wider net. And so as we were kind of talking about before, many students will take the MCAT either right before the third year or sometime during their third year. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but most students will study between 200 to 300 hours over the course of 3 to 4 months to get a competitive score. So if you're in your third year and you haven't taken the MCAT yet, you haven't really even thought about it yet, and you're planning on applying to medical school, now is probably the time to get on that. And of course, in your third year, we do recommend that you continue to participate in your extracurricular activities, seeking out opportunities, trying to obtain leadership positions, really expanding your resume, always taking things to the next level. Because, right before your fourth year is really whenever you're starting to send in your applications. So, interview season, we're going to talk about kind of dates later on, but it really is right around the corner. And so your fourth year will be busy with filling out any secondaries, interviewing, ultimately deciding where you're going to go to medical school. And then that will be kind of the steps you'll have to take throughout this process. So we've written a couple articles about the timelines if you're interested in either the MD path or the DO path, and I'll send those in the chat right now while Michaela is talking next about our application types.
And I sent you a message. It's not letting me
Oh, that's okay.
anything.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I had that queued up to send out too. So essentially, very similar to when you're applying to undergrad programs for college, there are different application platforms when it comes to medical school, but they're all very similar. So you have choices, but they're all very similar. So the TMDSAS, it's a whole lot of acronyms there, which is both MD and DO. They're all Texas MD and DO and dental schools. So if you're in Texas or if you're planning to apply to a Texas MD or DO program or dental, you'll be using this one. And then there's the AMCAS, which is all other MD schools. And then the AACOMAS, which is all other DO schools. Most US medical schools participate in the AMCAS, which you can see all the words down there, but all medical schools in Texas use that Texas application service. And then, of course, currently there are two separate application services for US osteopathic medical schools, which are those DO programs. And that's the Texas one, and also the AACOMAS is used by all other DO schools that are not the Texas schools. So just usually using these centralized application systems like these just helps simplify the process more and encourages more students to apply. They're all going to require very similar things: personal statements, activity lists, letters of recommendation, transcripts, and they just look a little bit different from platform to platform.
Perfect. Okay. Oops. Did I skip something? Yeah. New date.
No, you're good.
I'm excited. These numbers are, kind of a general idea. Last year, as you guys might know, the pandemic kind of messed up the whole timeline. So the applications do tend to open up May or mid-May. And so that's not going to change this year. But typically, the first day you can submit your applications for AMCAS was the first of, either end of May, 1st of June or so. It got pushed back last year. I was looking online beforehand. It doesn't have any information about that so far, but I would recommend that students have their applications ready to go by, the 1st of June. And then by mid-June is really the first day you can submit it. And so in case you aren't aware of the process, it's very similar. Actually, it's not really like colleges at all. So whenever you're applying to undergrad, because first your application needs to be verified. So they're going to look at, your information that you send in. AMCAS, TMDS, AS has to, verify that everything's correct, and that can take time. So typically it takes about 2 weeks, but of course, as they get more and more applications, then that time can take longer and longer. So even if you submitted on June 15th, the college might not get it until 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So typically they start submitting them. I believe last year it was the start of July, really was how it went, which is a little bit later than usual just because COVID pushed it back. So I was looking, I didn't really see any information about that this year, but we can kind of assume it might be similar again this year. So unlike when you were applying to undergrad, you knew what essays you were writing before you submitted. You knew if you were applying to, Harvard University, no matter how qualified or unqualified you were, that you were going to write your personal statement and then also that 150-word essay about, your extracurricular activity. That's not the case so much for med school. For med school, you're sending in your personal statement first, and then if they sometimes will screen students beforehand, and they'll send out secondary essays after the fact. And so these are really important because if you don't fill out the secondary essays, then you're not going to be considered for the actual seat in the medical school. And you might not think that there's a timeline if they don't say it, but it is really important that you fill these out as soon as possible. So sending them back within 2 weeks of receiving them is definitely a good guideline to have. Of course, the sooner the better, because the sooner you send it back in, the sooner the med school can evaluate your application in full, and then the sooner they can offer you an interview if that's the case. So this is a really important thing because they can start as early as late June in normal time. I'm guessing that because of pandemic, it might be a little bit later this year, but they typically start in August all the way through February, or even late spring if you're like on the wait list for an interview or something like that. And it is really important that even though interviews are obviously going through February, the later as it goes along in the season, the lower your chances of are getting a spot in for the interview and for the med school in general. So according to TMDSAS, which is the Texas application platform, 50% of the applicants in 2017 applied before August 1st, but they actually got 75% of the interview spots. So then the second half, the 50% who applied after August 1st, were competing for just 25 interview spots. So it's really important that you are submitting your application, you're sending back your secondaries, before that deadline, even if it's, just an arbitrary deadline in your head of as soon as possible. Really, July, August should be the latest you're really going for to give yourself the best spot possible. And the decision release dates can be as early as October or sometimes even as late as May. And whenever you do get accepted, when you do get the decision, it can be either admitted, rejected, or you can be offered a waitlist position, so kind of in limbo. Okay. So now Michaela is going to talk about our action steps.
So just action steps as far as things that you can be doing right now. I know that COVID derailed everyone's plans for taking tests, whether you're going into undergrad and you're talking about the SAT, or if you're going for medical school and it's the MCAT. So right now, we should just be operating under the assumption that you may just have less chances at, getting the scores you want before deadlines. So what I recommend is just to study as hard as you can to be overly prepared, and then you can take the MCAT early, and it's just the smartest move right now. The MCAT costs $315, and you'll need to study for roughly 200 to 300 hours over the course of 3 to 4 months to get a competitive score on the MCAT. And the Association of American Medical College has useful resources for preparing for the test, so definitely check out their website. The average MCAT score for students admitted to allopathic medical school was 510.4, and this score can honestly make or break your application success. By taking it in early spring, you can retake the test if needed, and typically the latest you should be taking the MCAT is early summer, because many medical schools will not consider your application until they have your score. And again, we're going to talk about this later when we're talking about timelines and dates and everything like that. But if you have a specific question about a timeline specific to your individual situation, this is a great topic to cover during a one-on-one session with us. And then letters of recommendation. So it's important to remember that you're going to have to ask recommenders for letters of recommendation. So it's essential to be pursuing worthwhile activities in college, like lab research under a professor, individual research, anything developing connections with your teachers. So you have great letters of recommendation, and you're not asking the professor that taught Bio 101 with 400 students and has no idea who you are. So when you ask them, just make sure you're giving them plenty of time in advance and give them a copy of your resume so they can write an effective letter. And then also be engaging with schools. Look at your entire college list and start engaging with all the schools you feel like you can reasonably go to. If it's a complete reach school and you have no chance of getting in, engage with them, but maybe less than the schools that you really go to. Use the same email address that you plan on applying with or that you've already applied with, so they can connect all the activity to you in their systems. Engage with them on social media, sign up for email notifications from them, send in a couple professional email questions to their admissions team so they can see that you're interested beyond just their emails. And above all, participate in virtual campus visits or Q&A webinars. all of this activity shows demonstrated interest to the college when there's so few physical in-person opportunities right now. This is the way you can show interest. So honestly, sign up for emails. When they send you an email or from an email campaign, open it, click on a link somewhere so it's showing that kind of motion in their system, and they can clearly see that you're interested. And then if you're able, when you feel safe, when your area is open, visit in person in addition to all of these things when you're able.
Yeah. And something I'm going to piggyback off of what you're kind of talking
Mhm.
about for letters of recommendation, because a lot of the med school students I'm working with this year who are juniors, a lot of them, almost all of them, I think actually are having virtual classes. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of a fear for them. It's like, well, who do I ask? Because I haven't
Yeah.
seen a professor for a year plus. But that's honestly no excuse, because they probably still hold office hours. They
Mhm.
still have an email. Like you can still be connecting with them even if it is like a virtual relationship, even if it's just you emailing them after class and being like, what a fantastic lecture. I took this away from your lecture. I wanted to research more about it. Can you give me more information about how to look for something? And then they're like, wow, I am a really great teacher. I'll totally help this kid. And then when you're asking for a letter of recommendation, they have fond feelings of you. So that's like
Mhm.
something simple you can be doing. If you're applying to med school, this upcoming cycle, you still have time to be fostering that relationship. If you're not really super confident with any teachers you can ask this year, that's a great way to kind of start now.
Mhm.
Of course, make it like, casual and authentic. Um, but there's no having a virtual teacher is no excuse not to get a good, strong letter of recommendation.
Yeah, and you can absolutely, do some research on your teachers or the grad students that are teaching your classes. I have a friend who she's now graduated, but she was going into a master's program in immunology and virology, and she found out that one of her professors was doing research in her exact area, and it was right at the beginning of COVID, and so she emailed him and just said, "Hi, is there anything I can do to help your research that's going on, like virtually? Is there anything you need filed? Is there anything I can help you with, from an admin point of view?" And she did. She got an internship with him and worked for an entire year before she graduated, all virtual. And so and then of course he wrote a letter of recommendation for her. So that's one idea, is just to get to know your professors and what they're doing in a lab or virtually, and just see if you can help them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay. So let's talk about the reason why I'm guessing a lot of you guys are here is the fear about having a not super strong resume. And the pandemic is really no excuse not to continue to have a strong resume. I did a lot of interviews with a couple DO and MD schools, admissions officers, asking them, how they're going to change their evaluation of students from the pandemic. And of course, they know that students aren't robots. You're not able um, to do some things that you would have ordinarily done. But that's absolutely no excuse. And so there are a lot of virtual opportunities you can be doing. You can be building something on your own. You can be creating on your own. You can be taking advantage of a virtual opportunity. And actually, the first one on my list, Web Shadowers, is like a perfect example of this. I actually just talked to the creators, the founders of them today, and they had like a really great summer planned. They're sophomores at a pre-med student, and something that they had planned for the summer, they had a lot of opportunities planned. They were going to do shadowing. They're going to do a lot of their volunteering over the summer. Like they had a really strong plan, but then pandemic happened, and obviously everything got canceled. So what they did instead was pivoted, noticed a need in the community, which was shadowing. No one could go and shadow, and then found a way to go about doing it. So now they've hosted web shadowing, and it's a virtual shadowing position where they have different doctors 3 or 4 times a week come and do presentations about case studies. And so if you're a pre-med student, either in high school or college, attending these types of things whenever in-person shadowing isn't possible is a really effective way to at least understand what the med school the field of medicine really is.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is really what your resume should be doing, is kind of proving that you've thought it through and that you can demonstrate the qualities that a physician should have. And so shadowing is definitely one thing that you can be doing virtually. there's no excuse if you can't do in person. If you can do in person, that's great. Something too that you might want to do, especially if you're in a university, is reach out to your pre-health advisor. A lot of them have systems in place for virtual shadowing, so you can actually be sitting in like a telehealth appointment. And so it's of course a little bit different, but it's a great way for you to connect with your pre-health advisor and then find out what opportunities are available within your university school system. So the next one to build your resume is volunteering. Volunteering isn't something that you can do in a couple months and be like, that's all I needed to do. It takes time. So if you're a freshman, you're a sophomore, starting now is really key. And once again, the pandemic is not an excuse. Just because you might really enjoy doing a certain thing that's in person, it's not possible right now. So you need to pivot and find something new that maybe kind of personifies, I don't know what that word is, mimics, there we go, mimics what you like to do in person, but virtually. So for example, if you really like tutoring, underprivileged kids, start tutoring online. If you really just are empathetic and you like to listen to people, there's tons of like, the crisis text line where you can be listening to people, or Seven Cups, where once again, it's kind of a chat-based service. So there's a ton of different ways you can still be connecting with people through volunteering. And so obviously a lot of students can't be volunteering in a hospital right now, and that's okay because it just isn't possible, but finding something else where you can be connecting with people is really key. The next one is research. So of course you can do research in a summer camp. Like for example, I'm trying to think of the name of some. Like SIP, I think is what it's called. I don't know why. Surf, all of the names just immediately left my brain as soon as I tried to think of some. But there's a ton of research camps geared towards both undergraduates and high school students. A lot of those deadlines, unfortunately, have already closed or are closing. And so if you're trying to find a research position, you can be kind of like what Michaela was talking about earlier. She reached out to someone, she found someone who was doing research in a field she was interested in, and then, pursued that opportunity. So you can be doing something similar within your university, or if you're going back home to your parents, if they live close to like a big university, same kind of thing. You can find, by reaching out to some research labs and positions like that.
And if I can just interject, I was just searching for high school research programs for a student I have in Michigan. And I would say I can't, and also one in Delaware. And for those two states specifically, like that was just a really small sample, I found maybe 5 total summer programs that had research involved for those two states. But for undergrad research, I found like 20 to 30. So the options out there for undergrad students looking for research is just so abundant. Like there's no reason why you can't be seeking these out.
And so someone just asked too if like some camps are paid or some camps are free. It's kind of a combination. Of course, there are some like, of the pay to play kind of things, but there are plenty of opportunities out there where it's free. And if you are just reaching out independently, it could be, it's almost always free too. I've never known of a student pays. Yeah, it seems like it'd be a little shady then, but it's definitely not a thing that necessarily happens.
Either it's a free internship or you're paid. So, but you don't have to pay. Oh, everything froze.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, got it. Okay, I don't know what happened.
I think you're still here though. Okay. I'm not sure where we were, so I'll just keep moving.
We were after research, so extracurricular.
Okay, extracurriculars. And so we're going to talk about this quite at length whenever we get to the resume, kind of thinking about what your activities tell about your life. But you should be thinking about this from your freshman year too. And so there are kind of 2 general paths that you can take, either a specialist, someone who, does one thing and then kind of does it deeply. So for example, I have a student who really loves tennis. And so and this is in high school, he was on the tennis team. He was the tennis captain. He taught tennis lessons. And now he's doing a clinic for women who have never played tennis before, who are over the age of 40. So he's always taking those interests to the next level, but it all is kind of connected to tennis. I have another girl who's really interested in, I think it's smoking. I just spoke to her for the first time, so I can't quite remember. Really interested in like, teen smoking specifically. So she's done research projects on that. She's, met with congressmen and like, helped pass legislation in her local area. She's part of like councils and teams and things like that. So all of her activities kind of are all together with the smoking, or the anti-teen smoking, really. So she's definitely a specialist, whereas other students are more of generalists. So they have a lot of different interests. They're not doing things as deeply, but they have a wider array of interests. And I think that you can argue both sides are good, because one, you do have kind of more skill sets perhaps, but definitely do think about like what kind of story your resume is telling you about, how you can always take those extracurriculars to the next level. So if you are really passionate about health disparities, how can you be helping people? Can you do a research on it? Like, what more can you be doing to kind of solve an issue with whatever issue it might be? And the last thing that med school resumes really should have is, of course, like leadership skills. As a doctor, you'll be a leader in your community, you'll be a leader in the hospital. And so they want to make sure that you do have that ability. And so you can be getting this a lot of different ways, if it is from tutoring or from being a TA, teacher's assistant, or a manager at a job. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're showcasing your leadership skills in some way. Okay.
Absolutely. And we're going to shift now and cover the personal statement. So, of course, we see on the page there'll be one essay that you write for, if you choose to do one application platform, there'll be one essay, and then you are going to be sending that through dozens of applications. And then, of course, you'll get invitations to do the secondary essays. But that one essay is really your gateway to acceptances anywhere. And you're going to have, 5,300 characters, or for the first two, for the US ones that are not Texas, and then 5,000 characters for the Texas application.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Oh, I thought there was like another slide about that. I'll just keep going. When students are preparing to apply to medical school, you do have to prepare a personal statement and that you're going to be using to apply to all of the colleges on your list. And then, to get into your dream school, you not only need great grades and test scores, but also a super strong personal statement. The essay allows schools to do a holistic review of your application. It allows them to see a full picture of who you are outside of just a resume. Otherwise, a resume seems really impersonal. So an essay is really how you show your personality beyond the page. So this is not the time just to simply kind of restate your resume, in other words, or just casually introduce yourself. It's really the time to stand out and let your words create a powerful message of your character and who you are.
Yeah, perfect. And so this can be super daunting to students, because it is kind of your one chance to showcase your personality to students. And so we struggle with this with our students, or I guess our students struggle, and we try and help them with this as much as possible, because we want to showcase more than just the grades, the extracurricular activities, your MCAT score. That's just your academic side, but we want to see the personality. So how are we going to use those, 5,000 or so characters to really show who you are? And so whenever I personally start working with like a Moon Prep student, one of the first things that I typically do is send them brainstorming questions. And these are just like kind of a few examples of them. And if you look on our website, we do have like a link of more examples, and I can send you guys also a link, I think, here in the chat as well, so you can see them. But I think it's really important to remember that a regular event in your life can also serve as a really great essay topic. This is where students kind of get stuck because they're like, well, this isn't the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. And honestly, that doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to think about all the monumental things that have happened to them or maybe never happened to them. It just needs to showcase you as a person and your personality. And of course, it's best if it's something that shows your motivation to join the medical field. So as you can see, these 5 questions or so are designed to help you start thinking about what makes you unique. You might want to think about your biggest achievements, a time you showed leadership, or a big challenge you overcame. And like Michaela was saying, like this essay is like not the time to be modest because this is when you're going to showcase your accomplishments.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying to be like boastful or arrogant, but use your story to highlight your good qualities. And honestly, I've had very few students who have erred on the side of being too boastful. Most of the time, students are never really talking about how awesome they are. They'll be like, "Yeah, so I like put together this like research paper." And that's it. But they're not really telling us they put together this research paper like on their science fair project that won first prize, and then now is like giving 1,000 people fresh, clean water or something
Yeah.
like that. Well, we're not really seeing everything they did, and this is like your one time to show us that. And so we definitely want to spend this essay thinking about what makes you impressive. And so I tell students to kind of think about like what your mom would say to her friends when she's like bragging about you. Like what would she be telling? Like what kind of words would she be using? And then, kind of use mom energy and rewrite that story into your own words to tell one concise story of yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and we're going to go over this quite a bit later because this is really, especially if you're applying this upcoming cycle, there's not a lot you can change about your resume at this point. There's not a lot of things you can change about your grades or anything like that. But your essay is your time to shine and where um, a lot of the distinction between you and the thousands of other applicants can really come through.
I saw a question come in. I'm not a traditional student. I have a ton of college credits from Brazil, not medical related, but never transfer them to an American university or institution. Do I need to list on the application? So there's definitely room on your resume to list all the college credit that you have received. In addition to the fact that you should absolutely be getting credit for that. So you can actually check out transferology.com, I think is the name of it. And you should just be able to search, your current college and see what courses you've taken that should transfer over just fine. Just send in your transcript it says that you're a sophomore at a US college. So just send your college credits over and get credit for those. And then that will show the fact that will show medical colleges later that you pursued is like a leadership kind of position. The fact that you have searched or you sought out college credit, before even attending college in the US. So you should definitely get credit for those, and that can help you towards your application. But it's not necessarily going to be like a whole activity of itself on the application like resume section. So I would get credit for that in your current university if you can. And then put that on your resume. I have achieved 40 credit hours at a non-US institution. That's a great line to put on your resume too. Perfect. Okay, so the essay drafting process, we're going to talk about just kind of breaking it down, how to go about brainstorming and just drafting the entire thing. The first step is honestly what I tell my students is to read over brainstorming questions, just like the ones Lindsey talked about, and answer them on a blank page so that you've kind of explored the items you have on your resume. You've already kind of answered them with the items on your resume, and you've familiarized yourself with the content that's usually found in personal statements. Then your next step in my opinion, is to seek out a bunch of sample essays to get a feel for how you might like to format your personal statement. It might spark an idea for you that connects well to one of the biggest moments in your life that left a significant impact. I also recommend creating a separate document for every element. So you can just record down every element, every sentence or formula that you really liked in those sample essays, and then see if there's a way that you can recreate that formula or element in your own life and personal experiences. Then you can create an extended outline, which by that I mean full sentences or even paragraphs of exactly what you want to say and where. So you have a roadmap taking you to the right destination. And you have a great structure to start with before you actually start crafting the specific sentences that are going to carry the most weight. So, for example, if I started to write my essay and all I have in my outline is mention service trip to Germany here because that's where my dad's from. If that's all I have there and I don't have an extended essay, extended outline where there's a whole paragraph about like make sure it connects to this XYZ, then my sentence is probably going to be pretty straightforward. Like in the summer of 2012, I traveled to my father's homeland of Germany for a service trip. That's kind of bland, honestly. But if I really allowed myself time to really reflect on my experience and let me let my outline be introspective to help me be creative with my sentence building, my outline could read like talk about how visiting Germany in a service activity or role allowed my dad's homeland to feel more like my own home. That's a little bit more introspective. It gives me room to write more. And then suddenly, when I'm writing, the sentence could take shape into I realized as I traveled from my home in Germany with the XYZ mission, I was traveling the same miles my father covered decades ago, but this time in reverse. So it would like be a more beautiful sentence because I gave myself more material to work with in my outline. Just allow your extended essay to get deep and introspective about what you learned, what you took away from certain items on your resume, so that your sentences can build on that. Like you're not doing the creative process once, you're giving yourself multiple opportunities to be creative. I feel like, I'll sit down in one mood and I'll be in one mood and I'll be really creative in one way. And I come back to it and I think of completely new better ways to say things, and then your essay will be better for it. And then I highly recommend to start off right. This is kind of just my first trick that I'll tell you. You really need to grab the reader's attention. And I really can tell you my own experience from admissions, an admissions counselor, whether they're in medical school admissions or they're in undergraduate. They're reading dozens and dozens and dozens of essays every day when it comes to acceptance season. So, a really great opening line can honestly just change the game. Tell them that this is going to be a very interesting one. Keep reading. Don't skim this one. That's what they want. That's what we want to see out of your opening line. So just think of your essay like a mystery novel and open, after you write the extended outline and you have the content, brainstorm opening lines that would entice the reader to keep reading to your mystery conclusion. So the trick that I have is to find the thing that you want to talk about, the major event or realization that you have that you want to talk about, and then find a unique way to look at it. So just think of like an indirect way to look at it. I always say like zoom in on something when you're starting your essay and then zoom out the lens to give content. And when you read sample essays, you can see that so many times happening. That's if you rewatch this back and then you go and find sample essays, you'll see that kind of formula happening a lot. So for example, I had a student who wanted to convey through his essay that he was resilient and adaptable. That was his goal that he wanted to get across. So we talked about how he got that way, and it turns out that he moved to a new city almost every single year for his father's job. That made him adaptable and resilient. And his resume kind of shows him to be a jack of all trades and activities because he attended so many schools that had different clubs and everything. So we ended up starting his essay with, "It's amazing how small your life can look when it's packed into boxes." So he doesn't just come out and talk about how he's resilient. He starts telling his story through a unique perspective, how it's all, packed into boxes. And then his essay went on to be like, I unboxed this box and found this. It was a creative way of looking at his life rather than just saying, I moved around a lot and I'm really resilient. He does it in a creative way. He unrolls it creatively. So I just have some hooks, to start off your essay, just some examples here that were from past students. Like they say laughter is the best medicine. This was about a girl who really loved she was going into medicine, but she wrote stand-up comedy on the side. And she was talking about how that kind of like gave her leadership as she could own the stage as she went into medicine. And then beating the odds is quite literally in my blood. She talks about how her dad beat an autoimmune disease. And so that same resiliency is also in her blood, basically. And then you never know where a simple idea might take you. That's not necessarily the most groundbreaking opening line, but it does give you like, oh, where is this going? And then my hands shook as I discovered my mistake. That is definitely an opening line to a mystery novel. So you don't have to be that dramatic, but these are just some suggestions of opening lines that we've seen in the past.
Perfect. All right. So next we're going to go over a personal statement that we really loved at Moon Prep. And so this student that wrote it, we'll kind of go over some of it and then take like an overarching look at it so you can see how she weaves together everything. So kind of like what Michaela was saying about the hooks, we always want to try and bring everything back full circle to the end, so that it's like a pretty little package that you're presenting to the med school admissions officers. You can tie it off with a bow. So I'll read you this first paragraph and then we'll kind of flip over to the main one and kind of go from there. But here's the intro. Jinja, really? I probe as I serve as a sounding board to my 3 6th graders. I began our after-school class by asking, what is your favorite movie? It took weeks of fist bumps, words of affirmation, and self-deprecating jokes at my Korean skills to finally hear my students' walls of self-consciousness crumble as they filled the room with their voice. Hearing the phrases, I looked Moana, and yes, really, I watched him, I decide that we're going to practice on the verbs watch, see, and look. After my practice, I have them teach me similar Korean phrases. My students giggle while I stumble through pronunciation. After a day of coordinating my PowerPoints with the textbook and filling out evaluations, I reflect on the path that's brought me to this rural school in South Korea as a Fulbright English teaching assistant. And so you can kind of see here, I'm going to go back to the previous one. She's not necessarily telling us where she is right here in the beginning. She's throwing us into the middle of the story, like wondering or what she's doing. And that's exactly what you kind of want to do. Obviously, a lot of our students applying to med school this year aren't going to have an international teaching assistant Fulbright fellowship because a lot of those programs got canceled. And that's okay because, it's just whatever experiences you have that can become part of your essay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I don't know if you guys can see this. Hopefully you can. Oops, maybe too big.
Nope, that's good. Actually, I can see that okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So next we kind of go into why she loves science. So of course, this is kind of an important part because we want to see more about her and her background, and it can't just be about one thing. And so we're kind of learning a lot about her because once again, it's a very like narrative style writing. It's easy to read. It's super interesting. She has so many details. But only details that kind of add to the story. She's not just throwing in words to throw in words. Like every single word, you can really see that she's thought it through. She's talking about this mink that she's dissecting, but then she quickly moves on about how it's turned into a hunger to learn more about research, and then how she takes then that to the next level. So everything is always building off of each other. And so as we're kind of going along, you can see kind of what she's getting interested in. And that's exactly what we want to see. Obviously, we can kind of get an idea of her from her resume, but we're starting to understand her thought processes and why she's so interested in what she's interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in your personal statement, you probably want to showcase, as much experience you have, working in a clinical experience, if you've been able to have one of those experiences. And so for here, that's what she does as well. She talks about, how her public health coursework came alive as Dr. Guevara, the PI, talks about the policy. So, we're starting to see how everything is coming together in her essay. And then ultimately, she's also talking about her shadowing experience. And so no matter if it's a virtual shadowing experience, an in-person shadowing experience, ultimately we just want to see how you've kind of solidified that desire to become a doctor. And a lot of it is through, watching them work. A lot of us have, well, actually not me, but a lot of you guys probably had a childhood desire to become a doctor. And then, that desire grew and grew and grew. And so it's not enough that you just always have wanted to be a doctor. It's what are the reasons why you want to be a doctor? And we're starting to really see it. She loves the science. She loves, the working with the patients. She loves, explaining, looking at the human's adaptability and limits. So she's really starting to connect the science with the emotional side of it, how the compassionate medicine requires combining science with an understanding of social pressures and the patient's priorities. So it's not enough that you just love science, because a doctor is much more than just the science. It's about communicating with the patients, about having that level of empathy. And so she's bringing that together beautifully in this essay.
Mhm.
And so as we kind of go along, she's talking more about seeing it in work, understanding the role of being a doctor. And then what really makes this essay so great is that she ties it all back together with that Fulbright grant, with that meat dissection that she talked about in the beginning. We're starting to see how her perspective has changed her desire to become a doctor. She wants to be a doctor who, understands what it's like to not be understood, because she was, in Korea and had some of those experiences where it was hard to get medical advice because she didn't speak the language, how to connect with those people. So she really, doesn't just tell us that she went to Korea and these are the lessons she learned. She's really showing us through her words here. And that's really what makes this essay so effective, is she's showing us everything. What, like Michaela was saying, she's not just telling us that she did X, Y, Z. She's using her stories to showcase who she is as a med school student. And so really this conclusion is what ties it all together. We see it coming all back together, and then ultimately why being a physician is right for her, and this is what makes it such an effective personal statement.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Anything you want to add to that, Michaela?
No, not really. Just, if you feel like you are struggling with the fact that you are running into, I don't know how to show and not tell, then that's when you give us an email and we can help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does take time too. So if you are planning on applying to the cycle, planning for the May application cycle when it opens, starting your essay now, I think, is really a good idea. This was not done on her first attempt. It probably wasn't done on her second or third attempt. Some students take much longer.
Mhm.
It takes time, as Michaela and I both know,
Yes.
sometimes much longer than you would think it should take. But that's just the way it is. And so if you want to have a beautifully written essay, I mean, a lot of you guys are very science minded. You might not have been working the writer muscle in your brain. And that makes sense. And that writing maybe is a little bit harder for you. And so we can help with that, of course, but just know that it does take time. You can't start it the night before application season or application, whenever it's due, and expect to do fantastic and get into every single medical school. Because of course it doesn't happen for anyone, but it especially won't happen in that case. So giving yourself the gift of time by starting your application, your personal statement now, is really key.
Mhm. And just as, another example of that, I have students that signed up with me, let's just talk about high school because that's an easier timeline kind of. I have high school students that signed up as a junior to work, with Moon Prep, and their essays going into college application season just are beautiful and well done. They spent the right time on, they had the time to spend on it to actually complete the story instead of just get something on a page because they have a deadline, as opposed to the students that, joined in October before November 1st deadlines. The essays of the juniors just look, if you read them side by side, you would admit the earlier students for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I almost never have a student who nails it on the first try. 1 or 2 times it's happened, where they absolutely nail it, where I'm like, you're brilliant. I don't need to do it. But that unfortunately rarely ever happens. So, give yourself the gift of time.
Yeah.
And it is more important than ever to spend your time on your personal statement, just because, as you can see by these numbers, the med school admissions has really been affected by the coronavirus. So applications have been up in just an insane amount. As you can see here too, through AMCAS, applications are up 17%, through AACOM, 19%. So students are perhaps applying to more schools, perhaps more students are shooting their shot and applying. As of right now, I don't think there's any data out about what's been going on, but these numbers are absolutely insane. To give it a comparison, on most normal years, you'll see an increase of 3% in the application. So 18 or 19% is unheard of, really. And so, it could be because of like the Fauci effect. It could be because, more students are just applying to more. We don't really know. So just making sure that you are really thinking it through with your med school application, because if they're reading 20% more when they're already reading a ton of applications, you have to work, unfortunately, even harder to stand out with your essays and your resume and your grades and everything like that. But at this point, for you, the best thing really is, if you're a junior or planning on applying, um, is to start working on that now. Um,
Mhm.
so a couple other things that may have been changed by the med school admissions. A lot of med schools this past year went test optional, which seems kind of amazing. Like even really highly ranked ones like Stanford Medical School, any school that was, or any student that wasn't able to take the MCAT didn't have to submit it, but if you did take it, you did have to submit. And so of course, like it's just like with college, with the SAT, ACT, with test optional, like, it's unclear exactly what's going to happen, how it affects your application, especially for the MCAT, because that data just hasn't really been released yet. And it's also not super clear on if those policies will be in play this upcoming cycle too. Um, my guess is that, we might see some schools with similar things because, as the coronavirus continues, it might continue through the summer, it still will kind of disrupt the med school application process a bit. Um, and this past cycle too, a lot of schools, and I'm guessing it will be kind of similar this year too, you could submit your application without having an MCAT score, which wasn't the case before. So this is good for students who haven't been able to take the MCAT or maybe hoping to take it again. You can be applying, you can still send in your application while you're waiting for that score. And one thing that kind of did change, like I kind of already alluded to, was that pushback in the deadlines, accepting scores later than usual. But that being said, just because a deadline is pushed back, you should still be applying as soon as possible, because remember that number I said, 50% apply before August 1st, but they're taking 75% of the application spots. So applying earlier in the cycle will give you an edge. And whenever I did my interviews with the admissions officers for the MD and DO schools, that was something that they said, that they had to turn down highly qualified candidates who would have been offered an interview if they had applied earlier in the cycle. But at that point, there was just no more room in the class. And so they had to turn them down. So there's, no reason to be doing that to yourself. It's just disorganization if you're not applying on time or early, if you're not getting your letters of rec in, your activity list written, your resume, everything like that. There's really no excuse. Well, there maybe is some excuses, but, just making sure that you are doing everything in your power to get it done. Giving yourself the best shot, essentially. And if you are missing your MCAT score, continue to gather the other pieces. Ask your teachers, ask your mentors now for letters of recommendation, finish any prerequisites, and then, of course, write your personal statement so you can apply as soon as possible. Okay.
All right. So we just wanted to, reiterate that we do have a special for you, and, just that we have our contact information right on the screen for you, as well as coming in the chat. And just, keep in mind the fact that if you do run into a wall with your essay, we're here to help. We can help with essay writing or interview prep, traditional interviews or MMI interviews, and also just medical school selection, looking at your applicant profile and letting you know what medical schools you're a good match for, just getting a second look. And also we offer convenient hourly packages, so there's no long-term commitments, and we offer a full refund of any unused hours. So signing up for a package of, whatever, 50, 20 hours, and if we only use 15, then you are just refunded the rest. So it's easy and seamless, and we are here to help with anything you need in the entire process.
Yeah. And of course, our goal for this webinar is to leave you learning and, feeling confident that you are ready for the med school application process. So if you do have any feedback for us, because we know your time is valuable, if you could email us feedback, or if you have any positive feedback for us, we would love it if you sent it on our Facebook page.
Oh, I'm not sure if I'm still here or if Lindsay's the only one here. Lindsay? I am not sure what's happening. I'm sorry, everyone. If you are watching, if I'm the thing you're seeing, I'm so sorry. Um, I wanted just to say we know that your time is valuable. So if you do email us feedback or you do have positive feedback, we will send you our free ebook, and we will send it to you after we receive your feedback. And we also hope that you will join us for future webinars so we can answer more of your questions. If you have a suggestion for a webinar topic that you would like to see covered, send us an email and we will tackle it. Our email is, you can say lindsey@moonprep.com, and also just moonprep.com has all of our information, all of our contact information. Again, my name is Michaela, so you can find my email on there. It's just Michaela@moonprep too. And I think I'm back. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where Lindsay is. I'm so sorry, everyone. But please just email us if you have any questions, and also please join us for future webinars. I did want to say too that if you are interested in just receiving just general, medical news, we actually I write it. I do 2 newsletters for Moon Prep every single month. So if you want to sign up for our newsletters and just get just news from medical news, just college admissions news, I spend hours and hours and hours every month combing through every source you can possibly think of to make sure that we're sending out brand new news. The thing that's going in the most recent newsletter that's coming out next week is the fact that the Common App released a brand new essay prompt. And so that's just one example of, breaking news that we found and are putting in our newsletter immediately. So if you just go to our blog page, which is just moonprep.com backslash, I said backsplash because I'm redoing a house. I'm so sorry. But /blog, then there's a little contact or a little sign up for a newsletter on the very right side of the blog. And you can get all of our news that way. And I saw Lindsay was texting me saying that she's not able to join. So if you do have questions, please send them in now. I'm happy to answer them on my own, and I hope I have the answer. But if you have any questions, there was one sent in before that I'll answer while anybody remaining wants to send in a question. I don't want to cut this short and not answer anyone's question because that would be awful. But a question that was emailed in earlier says, how does finishing your undergraduate degree early and then applying to medical school without a gap year look to medical school admissions officers? So most people do, pursue a gap if they did if they did graduate early from their undergraduate degree, they do typically pursue a gap year, just to stay on the same track, and they do pursue volunteering or an internship of some kind. If you do have, if you're able to have the resume intact and a strong enough applicant profile, it certainly doesn't hurt to apply directly to medical schools. If you feel like your resume is ready to go and you have the MCAT score, it all depends on whether or not you planned ahead and did your MCAT score in advance. So if you feel like your application is ready to go, you're welcome to apply, directly to medical school without doing a gap year. Just make sure that everything is in order. But if there's any other questions, I don't see anything that's been sent in. Thank you for thank you, Jay Iyer. Thank you so much. Awesome seminar. Well, we will wrap up, but again, please join us. Sign up for the newsletter, moonprep.com/blog, and also please join us for future webinars. It was a pleasure having you and a pleasure taking your questions and sharing our advice. Have a great day, night.